Hey guys, welcome back. This video is for my grades of the Miami Dolphins Week 2 preseason game against the Detroit Lions. I am Eric Smith, 5 Reasons Sports contributor, co-host on Scouting the Fins, and you can find that on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel and the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed. What you're seeing on the screen currently is my grades from last week in parentheses, and then the players are listed in the order that they appeared in the game. And you can see that the overall grade for this week was a 7.02, which was a big jump from the 1.95 that I had for the overall last week. And as a reminder, 5.0 is considered a average performance based on what the Dolphins offensive line has done. If you tuned in last week, you should recall that it was a pretty rough week all around, and you can see that with the grades we have on the screen. Uh, some points to think about as we're talking through week 2 is that neither team was playing their starter, so the offensive line that we had in there was not playing against the Detroit starters, and there was also less of a rotation of players. Only the right tackle position saw 3 players appear. So, with less rotation there, more continuity tends to help the offensive line. And I also felt like the play calls this week, in a sense, were less about the offensive line and running backs, which I think are fairly settled, and more about sorting out the wide receivers, tight ends, the passing game stuff. And that's evidenced by my grades. I graded 44 passing plays compared to just 23 run plays. And unless the game is lopsided and the defensive line is just teeing off to stop the pass, that tends to skew the offensive line grades in a positive direction. Last week, Jonas Savaiinaea was one of our lowest grade players, coming in with a 0.00, which again just means that the grade that he had last week was below the minimum threshold. This week was not a whole lot better, coming in again as our lowest graded offensive lineman at a 0.10. But talking about context, only played in 19 plays in the game. And looking at the grades that I had marked negatively, I had 4 total plays. 3 of those were pass plays, and one of them was a run play. And we're going to spend a little time on a film review for Jonas Savaiinaea right here. Okay, so the plays we're looking at here are going to basically be in chronological order, not necessarily in order of good or bad. This first one here is going to be a outside zone, and really like the way that Jonah is able to get through this defender and use his right hand to create some vertical movement here. Right, watch as he gets off the ball, gets to that outside half, right? And now he's able to press with that right hand. See how the left hand's not even in there, right? This is really what we want to be able to see in terms of trying to seal that edge on these outside zone runs. And then you see the vertical movement here. So, even though there was some bad stuff in this game, there's still a lot of good stuff that we're seeing with Jonah, and the way that we see his ascension into a really good guard in the NFL. And this next one here, going to be another good play by Jonah. And this is one that I kind of highlighted on X as well. Also from a um, execution standpoint, this was a jet to the left side here. And last week we saw Patrick Paul as the starting left tackle climb immediately to the linebacker. And Jonah got in a decent position here, but was kind of driven back and out and made the receiver on the jet had to belly it back a little bit. So from a execution standpoint, we see Keon here giving a little more help to Jonah than what we got last week. So improvement from a scheme perspective there, but also from Jonah, similar to that outside zone run, just immediately getting to the outside half of this guy. Don't even need the left hand in the picture. Just creating some vertical movement with the right hand and then able to seal him to the outside, right? And that defender kind of falls off late, but by then, Jet is way outside. So, really nice improvement on that from week 1 to week 2, which is what you want to see out of your rookie offensive lineman. And now a little different look for Jonah here. Right now it's Brunskill is trying to take over this block. Jonah is helping and then climbing for this linebacker. And on one hand, would like to see Jonah help a little more than what he does for Brunskill here, because you can see that Brunskill is not able to take that over, right? And Brunskill not being able to win on the play side is the main reason that we don't get a big play here. But also, just looking at Jonah, needs to continue to do a better job, right? Getting to the second level. And he's getting there, right? But now he's got to be able to settle down a little earlier and be able to mirror this linebacker. As you can see, he's getting upfield. Athleticism, not a question at all. But as he gets to this point, right now, should be kind of flipping the hips and looking to seal, where you can see that he's still kind of getting vertical while he's got his eyes over there. And then by the time he's ready to flip around, that linebacker's already cutting underneath to get in on the play. Next one here is as much on timing and chemistry as it is anything, but you can see that Jonah's a bit late on the twist, right? Gets his shoulders probably turned a little too far inside for what you'd like. And then by the time he's getting back around, right, that defender's almost clearing him as he gets the hips around and ends up with a pressure right in the quarterback's face, right? But as he matures, just want to see Jonah be able to react to this a little earlier, right? And to the point that he can widen this defender outside and leave a clear throwing window for the quarterback. And then on this one, we're just getting a tough loss in pass protection. Again, as you can see, right, there are things that Jonah's doing well, but we're still going to have every once in a while, we're going to get some ugly reps out of him. And I think that as he gains more experience, we're going to see less of these. And then last play here for the film review portion for Jonah. As we talked about earlier on these stunts, he's got to get a little better. So it was nice to see, like I said, these plays are in chronological order. So this is still in the same game. You can see that he's not turning quite as far outside and in a better position to react to this defender. And even if he had gotten a clean release there, I think that you're going to see Jonah being able to widen him out. So just a in-game improvement on one of the things that we saw him struggle with earlier is a nice sign for the rookie. All right, back to the grades. Like I said, it's a low grade for Jonah, but when you add in a couple of bad plays on a low number of snaps, you tend to get that. Still nothing that I'm worried about at all. Saw some improvement in a couple of different places for Jonah going into week 2 of the preseason. So, like where he's heading, absolutely zero concerns with his play. Moving along, Jackson Carman, right? You can see that we had a big jump here, right? 5.0 is the average, so everybody else is going to be above the average performance of the offensive line. Again, going against backups for the most part, so not a huge surprise here, but it is nice to see the Dolphins' depth on the offensive line performing well. So after a 1.60 from last week, Jackson Carman is jumping up to a 5.69. Saw some solid stuff from him. Still had, some losses in there, but always felt like he was a better guard in this offense than he was a tackle. And I think he's showing that through the preseason this year. Next up, Dan Brunskill coming in at 6.20 after a 2.97. Just kind of a solid performance here. So he played in 35 snaps, and I had a total of 2 plays marked down for him. So solid overall performance. And, they didn't really ask him to do a lot, but especially, and we can have that discussion of Brunskill versus Liam as we get further into it and Liam comes back healthy. I think they're pretty similar players. And when you're talking about them as your, hopefully 7th, 8th, 9th guy off the bench, I think you're in pretty good shape with either of them. And I'm comfortable with Brunskill as the backup to Brewer as we head towards the regular season. Next up, the second left guard that came in was Braeden Daniels, and we talked last week about hoping to see him get a promotion, and felt like we did here. that, now he's running with the twos directly behind Jonas Savaiinaea. Little bit of a jump here from a 6.22 to a 7.25. And I'll be honest, I kind of expected his grade to come in better because I thought he did some really good things in this game. So for the second part of our film review, we're going to check out a couple of Braeden Daniels plays. All right, so before we start the film portion, I want to make it clear I'm not saying that Braeden Daniels is a starting caliber guard, but if you remember back to watching the 2024 Dolphins, watching Liam Eichenberg specifically, one of the things that he really lacked was his ability to recover once he was beat, and that really ended up with some ugly looking plays. And that's one of the things that really stands out to me for Braeden Daniels. On this one, he is beaten pretty bad initially. Right, they get that forklift technique. The defensive tackle gets his hands on Braeden Daniels' elbows, jacks him up. Right, never want to be in this position as an offensive lineman where your hands are flying above the defender. But you can see that Daniels does a good job. Right, re-anchors and gets over his skis. Right, still a really bad position here, but now he's able to drive off that left foot and get back into it and widen that guy out. So, this was not a positively graded play for me, but at the same time, still encouraging to see him be able to recover from a loss, get back into it, and not give up a sack. And the next one here is going to be kind of similar, still at your left guard here. And another one where this is a run play, and he as he fires off the ball, gets his feet going, gets a little too far with that forward lean, is not able to swing the hips around initially to widen this defender, but does a good job of using that left hand to kind of slingshot himself around and get back in a position to, give the running back a chance here. So, this is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about with Braeden Daniels. Like, this is the stuff that you can't necessarily teach as much. Some of this comes down to just kind of instincts and athleticism, but things aren't always going to be 100% for an offensive lineman. So if you can find those guys that are able to recover when they lose initially, then you can usually, get something out of those guys. So I still am high on Braeden Daniels and looking forward to him being part of the 53 as a backup offensive lineman. Next up is Larry Boram. Last week 2.64, this week up to a 7.09. But again, he was protected a lot of the 6 run plays that were run while he was in. Only one of those went to the right side. And even in the pass protection, most of the slide protections were slid in his direction. I think they know exactly what they're getting in Larry Boram. Uh, I don't think that you can ever leave him on an island, and I'm not sure that he is nearly what you want as a starting caliber. But I think that if he is the one backup in the room, then I think that he is somebody that you can get by with. Moving along, one of our other 0.00s from last week is Keon Smith, and he had a big bounce back game this year, playing every snap at left tackle, brought his grade up to a 7.16 for this week. Again, not doing anything crazy, but didn't have too many awful plays like he did last week. And it was more limited snaps last week, so playing the whole game gave him the opportunity to balance out the negative snaps. But, saw the improvement that I was hoping to see. Keon Smith did not play last year, recovering from a significant knee injury. Was really hoping that last week was more so just getting his feet wet, and this week was a lot closer to what I was expecting. Again, not something that I'm ready to throw into the starting lineup here, but as a backup to Patrick Paul, right? Hopefully, someone we don't have to see very often, got me closer to being comfortable with him being the tackle in that position. Next, we are going to have Jaylen McKenzie coming in at a 7.65 after a 2.05 last week. And similar to Boram, he was very protected. Only had one outside zone run to his side. A lot more inside zone and duo, and a lot of protections slid his way. So good grade here, but don't overthink this one. I think there's a competition between Ryan Hayes and Jaylen McKenzie for that. The next offensive tackles after Keon Smith and Larry Boram, but they were both protected a good bit in this game. Next up is Ryan Hayes. Same story there. Only played 20 plays in this game, which was the least of the right tackles, and very much protected. You're just looking at the slide protections. Of the seven or no 8 slide protections, 6 of those went in his direction. Also, only one outside zone to his direction. So the play calls protected him, but he did well in what was asked of him. And then next up, you might have seen that Josh Preeb had a really good grade by PFF. I had him the same way. Not quite perfect in terms of the raw grade, but once we put it into the formula and spit it out, comes out as above the threshold for a perfect grade. So 10.0 for him, but similar to the rest of the guys on the right side, very much protected. Didn't ask him to do a whole lot in this game. Only had one outside zone play to his direction. Lots of slide protections to him, and then Addison West. So he actually was perfect in my opinion, but again, a player that was not asked to do a whole lot in this game. So take that with a grain of salt. He performed well, but was not asked to do a whole lot. We're not asking him to get into space or to reach those 2 and 3 techniques the way that we are some of the other centers. He was only 3 outside zone run plays called in his 33 snaps in the game. So good day from Addison West and Josh Preeb. Don't want to take anything away from them, but also want to caution you about putting too much weight into this, considering that it was against the bottom of the roster guys, and the play calls really protected what they were asking them to do. All right, so there's the grades. And again, we've talked about it a bunch of times. Don't look into this too much without understanding the context behind it. But I think that we're starting to see the formation of how the 53-man roster is going to look. Paul, Savaiinaea, Brewer, James Daniels, and Austin Jackson are obviously your starting 5. I think that both Keon Smith and Larry Boram have made a very strong case to be on the roster. I think you're also going to see Daniel Brunskill start out as that initial kind of interior utility guy. And then I think it comes down to Braeden Daniels and Jackson Carman being the two that they're possibly looking at for that 9th spot. And then, of course, once Liam Eichenberg comes back, then you have to have a discussion there as well. But for right now, I'd expect the starting 5. I would expect Daniel Brunskill. I would expect Keon Smith, Larry Boram. That gets you to 8, and probably going to carry 9 to start the season. And I think that 9th is going to be either Braeden Daniels or Jackson Carman. So I think heading into this third preseason game, probably going to be the dress rehearsal for these starters. But when we get into the backups, the performance of those two is probably going to be one that I'm really looking at as the last offensive lineman on the 53. As always, appreciate you guys watching, and we will talk again soon.